So it appears, in a manner of speaking, that Jesus was creating something of an uproar in the city of Capernaum. So much so that his relatives came down from Nazareth to see exactly what it was that was going on, because they were hearing these reports. He has gone out of his mind. Imagine if you were the only sane person in a room full of crazy people, and all the crazy people looked at you and said, "You're nuts." That will probably help us to have a point of contact with which to sympathize, the situation in which our Lord found himself. He's out of his mind. So what was the cause of the uproar? Well, Jesus Christ is busy, very, very busy, one by one by one by one, delivering people possessed by demons. He was exorcising those possessed. Now, I know there are none of you in this room, but there are people out there who go, "Oh, the Catholic Church and her love affair with exorcisms, that quaint medieval rite." Well, exorcisms go further back than the Middle Ages. They were not the creation of a medieval mind to deal with things like mental illness, things they did not have the ability to understand. Exorcism and its ministry explicitly was used by, and passed on by Jesus Christ. And the thing that I sometimes think gets lost when we consider the Gospels is that we're so used to looking at the Gospels in small chunks, which is perfectly fine. But now and then we have to back up and look at the big picture. What exactly did Jesus Christ come into this world to do? To uproot the kingdom of Satan and turn it over on his head and replace it with his own. That's why he came. And we see this. So let's look, kind of at our common experience. Go back and take a peek at what was going on in the book of Genesis. I know there we have presented to us the fall of Adam and Eve. And what was the immediate effect of their sin? Is that they were covered in shame. So ashamed, in fact, they hid themselves from God, or thought it was at least a possibility. But God came in pursuit. Where are you? Do you think the omniscient God didn't know where Adam and Eve were at? No, he knew exactly where they were at. What is this signaling? It's that God's first response to the sin of Adam and Eve was to pursue them, as he pursues each and every one of us. Where are you? Initiating a rebuilding and a restoration of the friendship that had been forfeited and lost. But when God confronts Adam and Eve, this is the second thing that sin does to us, is that we always look for someone to blame for all of our problems. Adam, why did you eat the fruit? Because of the woman you put here. It's the woman. So he asks Eve, why did you do this? The serpent tricked me. The serpent tricked me. Who's buying it? No one. Adam, you were standing right there as she was talking to a demon. You say to her, we have a clear command. Put the fruit down and walk away. But that's not what happened. And when it happened, they're covered in shame. They're hiding themselves from God. And they're blaming each other for their problems. Blaming each other. And doesn't that sad story continue to play itself out? The refusal to take personal responsibility for our own free volitional acts. No one made you do it. No one. And as far as the shame, quit blaming and deal with your shame. Because that's what we need to look at. What's your shame telling you about your image of God? Your shame tells you an awful lot about how you think of God. Because there is a healthy shame and there's a mental illness. A healthy shame sorrows because it has offended a God who is so good, who loves us so much. That's healthy. But if our shame suggests to us anything different than that we can trust a loving Father who created and redeemed us and will take us back as often as we turn to Him, if our shame says anything different, we're on the path to mental illness if it gets out of control. And trust me, it does. It does. So anyway, everything lands back on the serpent's shoulders. It's back on Satan. Satan doesn't have anyone to blame, does he? I started this. I did it. So he's cursed. And then God tells him something extraordinary that we ought to listen to. He says, I'm going to put enmity between a woman and yourself, between her children and your children. And who are the children of the women? Well, of course, those are going to be the disciples of Jesus Christ. Let's not have to work all through scriptures to make the point. Let's just cut to the chase. And the children of the devil are those that sin and belong to him. And that we will be at war, constantly at war. But God says, you, Satan, and your children can only nip at the heels of my Son and his disciples, while my Son and his followers will crush your head and the heads of your minions. And that's exactly what Jesus Christ was doing in Capernaum. With his sandals off, one by one by one by one, he was crushing the head of the demons that were possessing the people he created and loved. He was setting them free. And people thought he was crazy. But he was the only sane one in the room, wasn't he? He was the only sane one in the room. Well, let's look at this. It's probably not going to be like super practical, as in, here's an actionable item you can do to kind of like, act on this gospel. But it at least gives us some food for thought. As I look at how, I want to conclude these remarks with you, this morning, is to look at, what Jesus Christ, has done. He came into this world to build a kingdom, to establish a kingdom, and that requires that another kingdom has to be vanquished. Where was Jesus Christ born? In the Roman Empire. Where did the Roman Empire come from? Centuries upon centuries upon centuries of conquest. Don't we say Rome wasn't built in a day? Don't we say Rome wasn't built in a day? And Jesus said, I have come to cast a fire on the earth, and oh, how I wish it were already ablaze. It's a process. It's going to take time. But Jesus Christ has already done it. And so if we want to look at summary, at what Jesus Christ has done, in terms of, establishing, his kingdom and laying its groundwork, is that he kind of, got everyone, kind of prepped and on board, with liberating people, those who were possessed by the devil, and already upsetting and disturbing the kingdom of Satan. But he had to deal its one final death blow before he finished his life on earth. And how did he do that? Well, he took up his cross. He took up his cross as if it were a plow and began to till the hard, rocky ground that lay before him to the top of Mount Calvary. And he softened that ground with his tears. He softened it with his tears. When he had died and was put in the tomb, 3 days later, he burst forth victorious. Burst forth victorious. Having defeated the devil, destroyed the power of sin, and destroyed the power of death. And he has given that banner of victory to us. He gave it to us. And we have to go confidently forth. How? By exactly the way he said. We have to take up our cross each day and follow in his footsteps. I know, as sometimes parents will say to their kids, when they're real little, and, isn't it unfortunate that one of the first phrases, kids really learn to master is, "That's not fair"? Well, and then you said to them, well, when you were born, there was no sign that said life is fair, right? Life is not fair. But you know what we can do? We can deal with our shame. We can quit blaming other people for our problems and take personal responsibility for our own volitional acts. We can take up our cross as Christ took up his, like a plow, and till the field of this world, and moisten it and soften it with our tears, literal and figurative. Literal and figurative. And we say, but why? If Christ has already won the victory, why give the banner to us? Why doesn't he just get it over with? Because it is over with from his perspective. From his perspective, it's done. We live in time. We live in time. And that whole drama has to play itself out. Century by millennia, person by person, until the Lord comes in glory.